The curse. I have already mentioned that a curse can cause an innocent person to be attacked by demons. Since this is the most common circumstance, I must discuss it separately. I will try to use specific words. There is not a universally accepted terminology, therefore every writer must define his own terms. Curse is a generic word. It is commonly defined as harming others through demonic intervention. This is an exact definition, but it does not explain the cause of the harm, hence the beginning of confusion. For instance, some believe that curse is synonymous with spell or witchcraft. In my opinion, spells and witchcraft are two different types of curses. I do not claim to give a comprehensive explanation, and I rely solely on my own experience when I define the following forms of curses. They are different but not independent. Crossovers are frequent. 1. Black magic. 2. Curses. 3. Evil eye. And 4. Spells. Black magic, or witchcraft, or satanic rites that culminate with black masses. I will address these practices under one heading because of their analogy. I list them in order of gravity. Their common characteristic is to obtain a curse against a specific person through magic formulas or rituals, at times very complex, by invoking the demon but without the use of particular objects. Whoever devotes himself to these practices becomes a servant of Satan through his own fault. Here I will discuss them only as instruments to harm others through curses. Scripture very decisively forbids these practices because they are a rejection of God and a turning towards Satan. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his son or his daughter as an offering, anyone who practices divination, a soothsayer or an augur, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a medium, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord. Deuteronomy 18:10-12. Do not turn to mediums or wizards. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God. Leviticus 19:31. A man or a woman who is a medium or a wizard shall be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. Leviticus 20:27, also Leviticus 19:26-31. Exodus is not more lenient. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Exodus 22:18. Other cultures also punished black magic with death. Even if the terminology they use is different, their meaning is very clear. I will say more on this subject later on. 2. Curses. Curses invoke evil, and the origin of all evil is demonic. When curses are spoken with true perfidy, especially if there is a blood relationship between the one who casts them and the accursed, the outcome can be terrible. The most common instances that I have encountered involved parents or grandparents who called down evil upon children or grandchildren. The most serious consequences occur when the evil wish is against someone's life, or when it is pronounced on a special occasion, such as a wedding. The authority and the bonds that tie parents to their children are stronger than any other. I will give 3 typical examples of curses. I helped a young man whose father wished evil upon him at birth. He obviously did not want this child, and continued to do so as long as the son lived at home. This poor young man suffered from every conceivable misfortune. He had poor health, he could not find a job, his marriage was difficult, his children became ill. The exorcisms were able to help him spiritually, but nothing more. A second case involved a young woman who wanted to marry a worthy young man whom she loved very much. Her parents were opposed, but when all their efforts failed, they went to the wedding. That same day the father took the daughter aside with an excuse and called down upon her every evil that he could think of against herself, her husband, and their future children. And it all happened despite exorcism and intense prayer. One more example. Once a well-educated man came to see me. He rolled up his pants and showed me his legs, horribly scarred by a succession of surgeries, and told me his story. His father had been a very intelligent young man. His father's mother had wanted him to become a priest no matter what, but he did not think he had a vocation. Eventually, life at home became unbearable, and the young man had to leave. He graduated from college, became successful in his profession, married, and had children. All this after a definitive break with his mother, who refused to see him for any reason. This man then showed me a photo of himself at the age of 8, taken by his father. It was the picture of a beautiful boy with a captivating smile, in short pants, bare knees, and the long socks that were in fashion at the time. His father had had the unhappy idea of sending this picture to the boy's grandmother, hoping that at the sight of this beautiful grandson she would agree to a reconciliation. Instead, she sent this message: "May the legs of that child be always ill, and if you ever come back to this village, you will die in the bed in which you were born." And so it happened. The man told me that his father went back to the village years after his mother's death, but he immediately felt ill. He was taken to the house in which he had been born, and he died the very same night. 3. The evil eye. This consists in a spell cast by looking at someone. It does not come about, as many think, by believing that some individuals cause bad luck by just looking at you. This is nonsense. The evil eye is a true spell. In other words, it presupposes the will to harm a predetermined person with the intervention of demons. In this instance, the nefarious deed is achieved through the sense of sight. While I could never be certain that a particular spell was the result of the evil eye, and whether a look had been sufficient, the effects were clear. Many times the perpetrator of the spell is not known, nor how it began. What is important is that the victim should not suspect everyone he meets, but forgive wholeheartedly whoever caused him evil, no matter who. I want to stress that, while I believe that the evil eye is possible, I cannot be positive that I have encountered it in my experience as an exorcist. 4. The spell, also known as malefice or hex. This is by far the most commonly used means to achieve evil. The name, in Latin, malefactus, means to do evil, that is, to make or manufacture some object with the most diverse and strange materials. This object has an almost symbolic value. It is a tangible sign of the will to harm, and it is offered to Satan to be imprinted with his evil powers. It is often said that Satan apes God. In this case, we can use the sacraments as an analogy. The sacraments use tangible matter, for instance, the water of baptism, as an instrument of grace. In the malefice, matter is used as an instrument of harm. There are two distinct ways a hex is applied to the designated target. The direct way consists of mixing the object that is used for the spell into the victim's food or drink. As already mentioned, this is manufactured with the most diverse materials. It can be menstrual blood, bones of dead people, various burned powders, mostly black, animal parts, the heart seems to be the favorite, peculiar herbs, and so on. But the evil efficacy is not so much in the material used as in the will to harm through demonic intervention. This will is manifested in the black magic formulas that are chanted while mixing this material. Almost always, the person who is struck by a hex, besides other symptoms, suffers a characteristic stomachache with which exorcists are very familiar, and that is healed only after much vomiting or through the feces, and the strangest objects are expelled. The second manner to apply a malefice is the indirect way. Here I refer to the terminology that Father Lagrua uses in his book, La Preghiera di Liberazione. This consists in hexing objects that belong to the target, photographs, clothes, or other belongings, or figures that represent the accursed, dolls, puppets, animals, even real people of the same age and sex. This is called transfer material, and it is struck with the same ills that are intended for the victim. A doll is a very common example. During this satanic rite, pins are stuck all around a doll's head. As a result, the victim suffers from intense headaches and comes to the exorcist saying, "It is as though my head were crisscrossed by sharp pins." It may be that needles, nails, and knives are stuck in the doll's body as a proxy for the intended victim. Regularly, the accursed feels excruciating pain that racks those very same points. Some people called sensitive, of whom I will speak later, are able to tell the victim, "You have a hat pin crossing you from this to that point," and reveal the precise locations. I have seen individuals expel strange and very long pins made of a substance resembling plastic or very flexible wood from the part that was targeted and immediately be released from pain. Liberation commonly follows the expulsion of the most unusual materials. Colored cotton thread, ribbons, nails, rolled-up wire. A malefice that takes the form of binding deserves a special mention. Whichever material is used for the transfer of evil is tied to hair or colored cloth strips, especially white, black, blue, or red, according to the desired result. Once, for example, to strike the fetus of a pregnant woman, a doll was bound from neck to umbilical cord by means of a needle threaded with horsehair, with the intent of deforming the baby by causing an abnormal development of the organs included between the bonds. This really happened. Fortunately, the harm proved to be less severe than intended. Bindings are specifically used to inhibit the development of certain body parts, but most often they are used to arrest mental development. Ties to the brain are inflicted to cause in the victims an inability to study, work, or exhibit normal behavior. When this malefice is successful, doctors are unable to identify the source of the illness and to cure it. It also often happens that the proof of a hex shows up in pillows and mattresses in the form of strange objects. If I were to tell of the bizarre, unbelievable facts that I have witnessed, I could go on forever. I have found just about everything, from colored and tied ribbons to chunks of hair tightly knotted, knot-filled string and wool that was thickly braided by superhuman strength in the shape of crowns, animals, especially mice, or geometric shapes, and blood clots. I have seen chunks of wood or iron, twisted wire, and dolls full of piercing and marks, and have witnessed the sudden appearance of very thick braids of children or women's hair. All these things are inexplicable without the intervention of an invisible hand. Sometimes these strange objects are not visible when the pillow or mattress is first opened, but after aspersion with exorcised water, or if a blessed image is put on them, especially a crucifix or an image of Mary, the most bizarre objects materialize. I will return to this subject in the following pages. Now I believe is the time to repeat the advice that Father Lagrua recommends in his previously mentioned book, La Preghiera di Liberazione. Even though what I wrote is the result of direct experience, we must not believe too easily in curses, especially those cast through the means of malefice. Hexes are always rare. When the complaints that are brought to the exorcist are analyzed, they almost invariably reveal psychological causes such as suggestiveness and false fears. Also, curses are often unsuccessful for many reasons, for instance, because God does not allow the evil or the intended victim is a person of deep prayer and union with God. Additionally, many sorcerers are inexperienced or unable to follow through. Others are simply swindlers, or the devil himself, liar from the beginning as the gospel brands him, fools his own servants. It would be a most grave error to live in fear of falling victim to a hex. The Bible never tells us to fear the devil. Instead, we are told to resist him in the certainty that he will flee from us. James 4:7. And to remain watchful against his attacks by remaining firm in our faith. 1 Peter 5:9. We have been given the grace of Christ, who defeated Satan with his cross. We have the intercession of Mary, who has been an enemy of Satan since the beginning of humanity. We have the help of the angels and the saints. Most of all, at baptism, we have been sealed with the Holy Trinity. If we live in communion with God, it is Satan and all of hell who tremble at our presence, unless we ourselves open the door to him. Since the curse is the most common form of diabolical influence, I will add a few other insights, which I have gained through experience. The curse may assume different characteristics, according to the end that is desired. For instance, it may be called divisive if it is intended to separate spouses, engaged couples, or friends. Many times I have dealt with engaged couples who loved each other, broke up without any apparent reason, and never managed to reconcile. I later found out that one of the couple's parents was against their marriage and turned to a practitioner of black magic to break the engagement. Another type of curse may be called infatuation, which is used to lead someone to fall in love. I know of a girl who fell in love with her best friend's fiancé. After fruitlessly trying to make him return her love, she went to a sorcerer. The engaged couple separated, and the man married the girl who commissioned the curse. Needless to say, it was a horrible marriage. The husband was unable to leave his wife, but he never loved her and always had the feeling that he had been forced to marry her. Other curses are called illness, because the target will always be sick. The so-called death curse is named destruction. In this case, it is sufficient that the targeted individual invoke the protection of the church. In other words, that the individual begin to pray, to ask others to pray intensely, and to seek exorcisms, and death will be avoided. I have followed many such cases. I have already mentioned that the Lord at times intervened miraculously, or at least in ways that are humanly inexplicable, to save the lives of these individuals from deadly dangers and, in particular, from suicide attempts. Almost always, I should say always, at least in those instances of which I am aware, when the curse is powerful, it also includes diabolical oppression, or even possession. That is why exorcism is necessary. The most dreadful curses can be those that are intended for the destruction of an entire family, or to strike an entire family. Norm number 8 of the ritual for exorcisms cautions against referring those who are the target of curses to sorcerers or warlocks or other individuals who are not ministers of the church. The use of any form of superstition or other illicit means in an attempt to be healed is forbidden. Experience teaches that this warning is necessary. Sorcerers are many, exorcists are rare. Unfortunately, some writers have advised going to a sorcerer for help against curses, even if the patient suspects that he will be the target of yet another curse. Such advice is an unpardonable mistake, especially coming from well-regarded and experienced authors in books that are otherwise praiseworthy. This warning is especially important because the tendency to turn to sorcerers, warlocks, witch doctors, and such is as old as the world itself. Despite the social, cultural, and scientific progress, the habit of consulting the ministers of the occult seems to coexist peacefully with our modern world. All social classes, even those most educated, are involved: engineers, doctors, teachers, politicians, and so on. Norm number 20 of the ritual suggests asking the demon the cause of his presence, particularly whether it is due to something the individual ate or drank. If this is the case, the exorcist must command the person to vomit. If instead the curse is due to some foreign object, the exorcist must ask to be shown where the object is hidden, find it, and burn it. These are all useful suggestions. In fact, when food or drink is the vehicle through which a curse is delivered, we will always encounter that particular stomachache which I mentioned before. In this case, liberation always occurs through physiological means. The use of exorcised water, salt, or oil will greatly help the process. It is also possible that some cursed objects are expelled in mysterious ways, as I have already explained. For instance, the victim may suddenly feel a strange weight in the stomach, almost like a rock. After a while, he finds a rock on the ground, and the pain disappears. Other objects, colored strings, braided cords, and many other items may be found. They must all be sprinkled with blessed water. The individual himself can do this, then burned in the open, and the ashes thrown into running water. Items that cannot be burned, such as wire, must also be thrown into running water, either a river or the sewer. Nothing must be thrown into the toilet or sink. When this happens, often the entire house is flooded, or every drain becomes plugged. Often the strange objects discovered in mattresses or pillows were not found by questioning the demon, but through the indication of charismatic or sensory individuals. I will return to this subject, after which the exorcist is called. At this point, it is also necessary to burn the mattress or the pillows outdoors, after sprinkling them with holy water, and to deal with the ashes as I mentioned above. It is important that, while the cursed objects are burning, everyone pray. We cannot be too careful, especially when the curse is discovered by chance or through demonic revelation. During my training, Father Candido told me of an error that he had made at the beginning of his career. Father Candido and another Passionist priest, both authorized by the bishop, were exorcising a girl. While questioning the demon, they discovered that the girl was under a malefice. They asked for its form, and they were told that it was a wooden box, the size of a hand. They asked for the precise location and were told that it was buried 3 yards deep, near a certain tree. Full of zeal and armed with a spade and a hoe, they went digging on the spot. They found the box just as they had been told, opened it, and found an obscene figurine among a lot of junk. They sprinkled everything with alcohol and immediately burned everything carefully, until only a pile of ashes remained. But they did not bless the objects before burning them, and they forgot to pray throughout the process, invoking the protection of the blood of Christ. They had repeatedly touched those objects without immediately washing their hands with holy water. The end of the story is this. Father Candido was in bed for 3 months with a severe stomachache. These pains continued for 10 years with less intensity, and they recurred periodically afterward. This was a tough lesson, but it was useful to me and to anyone who may be in the same situation. I also asked Father Candido if, after all that suffering and hardship, the young woman was liberated. The answer was negative. She felt no benefit. This teaches us that, at times, hexes do all their damage when they are first put into place. Finding the objects and destroying them later is useless. I dealt with several similar cases in which between the time of casting of the malefice and that of finding the objects many years had gone by. The hex had already accomplished all its evil work, and no benefits were felt when the object was found and destroyed. What helped later on were exorcisms, prayers, and the sacraments. Under other circumstances, burning the object stops the malefice. For example, the so-called hexes unto death by putrefaction. Once, while investigating a hex, I discovered that some cursed meat was buried. Fortunately, it was found and destroyed before putrefaction, and thus the death of the accursed was avoided. Sometimes animals are buried alive, especially toads, leaving an air pocket around them to enable them to breathe for a while. If they are found before they die, the hex is broken. Nevertheless, the primary tools against the malefice are exorcism, prayer, the sacraments, and sacramentals. I cannot overemphasize the importance of turning to God and His means of liberation instead of a sorcerer or a magician, even when we are under the impression that God's ways are slow. The Lord gave us the power of His name, the strength of prayer, both individual and in community, and the intercession of the Church. Turning to a sorcerer, to someone who hides his actions under the false name of white magic, which is always an appeal for Satan's help, as anyone who uses a curse to take away another curse does, can only aggravate the evil. The Gospel talks about a demon who leaves a soul to come back later with 7 demons worse than himself. Matthew 12:43-45. This is what happens when we turn to witchcraft. I will give 3 typical examples.
This is the first part of our episode on exorcism. Stay tuned for the second part, which I will post soon. Blessings to you all.